Welcome to Shadows of Dawn.
Welcome to Shadows of Dawn. This is the Fellhammer 5 campaign recap. Woo! Cheer, celebrate. I have with me Xanthos, the paladin, and Bevier, the fighter. We have the tank company today. Which is actually kind of nice. This was a very tank-heavy group. Hello, hi guys, watching in. I see Braylon and Kel so far. Thanks for joining. So I just kind of want to start this real quick and say that, you guys, the Fellhammer 5 actually was a group that had a little bit of turnover, but these two were constant from beginning to end and always involved in the RP. And kind of a dichotomy for me in a way, because with Bevier, this was the first time that we'd ever really gamed together, even though we've known each other for a bunch of years, but this was the first time.
Yeah. And I think I was, of all the group, even the new and old, the people that transitioned through, I think I was the newest player as well. I played a little bit when I was a teenager, but this is only like my second campaign.
Right, I think so. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I got Jim, who we've probably gamed together going on probably, I'm going to say 20-something years and change.
Wow.
I mean, when you think about it, I think the only person that I'm playing with right now that I've gamed with longer might have been Tiffany, and that's about it. So it's kind of like, my old buddy, old gaming buddy and new gaming buddy. So we're in the same group. That was actually pretty cool when I sat and thought about it for a while. So this is the Fellhammer 5 campaign review, and we are going to go through the story so far and share it with you and basically get their guys' thoughts about how they experienced this strange world. So if you're following along, you can go to the campaign, the Figma page, and on the PCs. And the Fellhammer 5 actually have their own art. We have Xanthos, the paladin, over here, and Bevier, who's like, yeah, look at me.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Durnavir, Brian Warner, Santee, and Ramus. I know there's 6. Don't ask.
We can't count. Don't worry, we can't count.
They started as 5, and they got their name as 5, and when 6 came along, they were like,
5 to 3 to, 5
yeah, it was 5 to 3 to 5 to 6 to 5 to 6 to 5. Man, it jumped all over the place. But so you guys were the third group. So you guys knew coming into this campaign that you were a third group in the same world. What was your original thoughts, and how did that? What did you think? I guess it developed over time. Did those? Did it meet what you expected? Was it different? Was it better? Was it worse?
Santos, you want to go? Okay.
I wasn't sure what the other groups did, if it would really affect us at all or not. And of course it turned out it did. We were really all working real time in the same world, and things that they did happened in our world. So that I just didn't really know if that would work out at the beginning.
Yeah, you and me both. Spoiler alert, you and me both. I didn't know it was going to work out either. I was hoping, but that was the grand experiment.
Well, it started, at least from my perspective, the crossover started kind of light.
Yeah.
With, you let us get established for a few, then we started seeing some of their effects, and then later on, I don't want to jump ahead, but we got into some of the heavy plot crossover and players meeting and exchanging information.
We did. So your group started off kind of on the tail end of what I called the Fiend arc, and right at kind of the beginning of what I called the Cult of the Black Earth arc. So your group they were all from Fellhammer, and during the Fellhammer market day, goblins snatched a child, and this group was just formed out of the people who took off and chased them down. So just one of those. These were the volunteers that rushed out of the market to go pursue the goblins who had carried this small child, and
very much the players were kind of the same.
Yeah.
Nobody. Well, I had one friend in there, and I knew people here and there, but nobody really knew how each other played and so forth. So
for the most part,
life imitates art, or art imitates life.
So it was a very simple adventure where you rushed off and you chased them into little goblin caves, and you basically managed to save the child. But from a plot perspective, you were going against this imp named Kilmeny, who was an imp that he was the third general in the Fiend arc, and at this point, I think he's the sole survivor. So the big leader Fiend had been killed, the first general had been killed, the second general had been killed or was just being killed by the Saren defenders, and the Fiend arcs, they were losing. So these guys, from the backstory, these guys were struggling to try to, find a way to maintain power. And his idea was to basically do a sacrifice. And that was kind of that idea. Pretty simple plot.
Well, and again, with the players, we had no clue what was going on. It's kind of like the players and the characters. You're only getting a little piece of the story as things are happening.
Right. So you discovered real quickly here the cult of the Black Earth, and this imp was working with them and trying to make a sacrifice to a night deity. So for the Saren defenders, they would be a lot more familiar with temples of night and darkness, because most of their first half of their first arc was dealing with temples of night and dark, and there's a constant dark theme with them. So you guys were kind of looped in here, unbeknownst to you at the time. And you found the child, managed to free the child, returned to the town. Everybody was happy.
Well, we discovered our arch nemesis as well, ropes. Ropes were very much our arch nemesis.
That is watching. True.
We end up with a draw we all have to go down, and there's a little, 10 foot, 15? I don't remember. It wasn't much. Little rise, and there's a rope hanging, and I think everybody fell off the rope and hurt themselves.
Yep.
Like the very first thing before we fought anything.
So
this is the first thing that happens.
We need to make a drinking game out of this. Every time somebody falls off a rope, you and the Saren defenders would get absolutely smashed.
And sometimes the skill checks are not our friends. That's true.
I know, right? No. It's kind of funny because out of all the groups, this group was the tankiest. So they had the most fighters. Paladin, fighter, ranger. The wizard was a blade singer, so very frontline heavy. But yeah, just one of those things. But quickly, you were kind of celebrated as a group at that point in time, and the Hunters Guild approached you off of your success and asked you to follow up on a little goblin clan, the Red Dog Goblin Tribe. To check it out. And so, unbeknownst to you as players, the Hunters Guild knew about this because of when we went to Renaissance Festival with the Dragon Slayers of Elspar, we did just these RP campaigns. And Drya Moonshade, who was a ranger in that one, her RP had to go find some herbs and things like that. Well, she located the Red Dog Goblin Tribe, but she was just by herself, so she couldn't really take it out or anything. But that's how the guild came to know about it. So once again, one group kind of affecting another. It was her information which led back to the Hunters Guild, which hired you to go out to investigate. Magic. So this was you in infiltrating. Let's see, I got some pictures. Yeah, just a couple of pictures. Playing with the dretches there and the lemurs, and going through the caves. Once again, another goblin cave for you guys to go after. Another pretty simple little adventure. And for those who are wondering,
So is this the giant? We have the giant outside, or am I on the wrong episode on there?
I don't think this has the giant outside.
That must have been in the next episode. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself.
So yeah, you were in. This is Fellhammer. Anybody's looking at the map, and they just ran into the mountains in the first episode. Well, the second episode was down here. There it is, actually.
Yeah.
Blinking. Find the hot spot. There you go. Red Dog, Goblin Clan, right there. So if you roll around this map, I have the bunch of little hidden things that only players kind of know about if they went there. So if they roll over it, it kind of identifies it for them. So that's where it was, a dog goblin tribe. And once again, you discovered the connection with the Cult of the Black Earth, and you discovered that envoys had been sent to the Caves of Chaos to form an alliance with bugbears. And you learned the name Yarsha, who was some sort of general for the cult or some sort of important person. And yeah, Yarsha became one of y'all's main nemesis. And another one who was known as Q. This guy actually encountered the Dragon Slayers. So you guys, your main nemesis, your antagonist became Yarsha. And you... and so it was pretty swift. It was pretty swift, pretty simple. You went in there, you kind of discovered it. This was where. So what happened behind the scenes is the Cult of the Black Earth was realizing that the fiends were basically trying to get them to help the fiends. Well, the Cult of Black Earth just betrayed them, and so this was where the imp Kilmany was betrayed by one of the cultists, which was Yarsha, and killed him. And basically, like, you've given us all this stuff in order to help you, but we're just going to kill you and take it. So this is really the end of the Fiend arc, actually, in this episode, where the last general dies due to the Cult of the Black Earth trying to upsert power. So in the long story, this was kind of pivotal, but, to y'all, it was just like, bad guys killing bad guys.
Yeah, the individual missions aren't that complicated per se, but the backstories, the little pieces that we're uncovering are pretty intricate.
It pays to take good notes.
Yes.
Quite.
Good.
And I was discovering this because for me, these felt like, you could tell there's something going on. They were good XP builders for the experience builders for the characters and whatnot. But the backstory in there was, it's like you're reading every other chapter of a book. You don't get the whole picture.
Right.
As a player.
As a player. Until a couple of groups can exchange info, and then they come together, and then they're able to be like, oh. So, which happened, which we did a couple times actually.
We did, yeah.
So episode 3, this is, you went to the Welcome Back Inn, you encountered Torben Gray and Saffron, who were there, and you were you'd heard about the Caves of Chaos, and when you'd mentioned it, they had mentioned something about a village that was southwest of Emdel, and some story about a homestead invasion, and so you were like, hey, we're on it, because, we just heard about this, and so we're going to go check it out. And the old Caves of Chaos were a mining thing, and this was one where the bugbears were getting involved. So the cult was trying to recruit the bugbears to help. And if you guys had not had success here or had left them, then the bugbears would have played a much bigger role in chapters to come.
Okay.
But you didn't. You wiped them out. Even though Yarsha escaped, you managed to wipe out the bugbears. And you fought a little dragon wormling here.
I'm trying to remember if this was the episode because we were still fairly new at this point, and we had gotten into a fight outside of the caves and got our tails whipped a little bit, and we're just barely hanging on. And that's when we encountered the giant. And by pure chance, one of our, one guy scrambles up a tree, one guy tries to run away. I remember stepping behind a tree and I'm getting ready to get out of here. And our wizard manages to convince the giant to leave, like the silver-tongued devil, the giant whisperer.
Yes. I think that was the end of this when you had chased Yarsha outside and he was running away.
That might have been it.
I think it says this is also where you. I think you had Gleep, so you had found the little red dog goblin and got him to surrender, and he's the one that kind of led you to where the kids were.
Yeah.
Wait, as
Gleep.
I recall,
Gleep comes back in later.
there was a giant there, and the silver-tongued persuasive paladin
Oh, was it?
persuaded the giant that he would perhaps rather have this bag of gold and move on along than fight this.
See, I recall it was the wizard that did it, but I could be wrong. Yeah, I do remember you offering the gold.
It was definitely Xanthos that was missing a little gold after that. So
Yeah,
I'm
you
pretty sure it
did
was
give him
Xanthos.
some gold.
I think you threw the gold, and the wizard was making the persuasion check. And,
I think the persuasion check
like
was
that.
the wizard, yes.
Okay,
I was down on HP and hiding behind a tree. So
We're both
as far
pretty
away as
persuasive.
possible.
That was funny. That was funny. And then, of course, you guys have Gleep, who's just tailing you all the way through this whole thing. He's like, oh, yeah.
It's like we're all gonna die.
Actually, you have a little goblin friend out there somewhere. 'Cause
Yeah, he survived a couple of times. He made guest appearances.
he did. So this was really kind of sinking you guys into the Cult of the Black Earth, right? So Yarsha was becoming your antagonist. And you had discovered here that from the notes that were left behind, that the cult was making power moves for magic, technology, and secret texts. And that Yarsha was on a mission to find something in the Gossamer Peaks. So your information that you delivered here played kind of heavily into the Dragon Slayers of Velspar, because they ended up going, the information I think went to the lawgivers, and lawgivers, looked at it, and, their feedback to like the Dragon Slayers was go after Quarbo. And that's where the Dragon Slayers ended up going to White Plume Mountain, while you guys ended up going after the laboratory of Qualesh.
Ah, yes.
Yes. So you ventured, over to Glissondale and then out towards the Gossamer Peaks, where you had another nasty rope incident.
It's neither here nor there.
I believe this was where Xanthos fell in the crevasse while everybody else went across.
Yes.
And they
I thought
fought
did he try to make the jump instead of using the rope? I can't remember. And
I forgot exactly what it was, but yeah. The fortunately, it was in the Gossamer Peak, so he fell into snow and didn't take a whole lot of damage. But it was like 50 feet down, and he couldn't climb back out.
Yeah.
It was like, it was like 100 feet down, and you didn't have enough rope to get him out that way. So he had to walk outside and around in order to get back.
Yeah, and we had a tough fight right after that almost took a couple people out.
That was the vampiric mist. Yep,
yeah.
Because there was some bones on the other side, and instead of going back and trying to figure out how to help Xanthos, somebody's like, I'm going to go search the bones.
Yeah,
and
that didn't end well.
Yeah, and then of course the vampiric mist comes out and starts attacking. So Xanthos is down there, you guys okay?
The one time they didn't have their paladin.
Yep.
I know. We needed him. Well, and this...
I think you're the only one that had a magic weapon at the time that could hit it.
Well, paladins can make their own magic weapons.
That too.
Yeah.
I
don't remember how we defeated it.
And then the paladin forgot, when you fall in the crevasse with a bunch of other people have fallen and died.
Yeah.
Yeah, check around.
Yeah, you might want to search.
There's always good stuff down there.
He forgot to search and walked out and probably left something on the table down there.
I'm sure I left some good stuff down there, as you pointed out later.
Yeah, I might have let that slip later.
And this started and as a new player, the Qualesh was probably the most memorable part of the story arc for me, because I don't even remember what level we were at. We were at 3 or 4 or something like that.
You're like 3 or what? So let's see. That would be 3, 4. You're 4, probably going on 5. Probably level 4 right here.
There. But this required a lot more pre-planning character-wise than we were ready for. Because we had some characters who shall remain nameless that ventured into the mountains and didn't have any food with them. And some of us who were
Durnavir the
underprepared
Hungry.
for the weather.
That was Durnavir the Hungry.
weather
You
was
can
brutal.
name him because
Yeah, it just and I had overpacked food, but I didn't overpack a lot of food, and didn't have a tent, didn't have these other things, and so the weather was as much an enemy. There's no forage in the mountains.
That's right. I had forgotten about the food thing, but
Yeah,
even
we were
the Gossamer
exhausted most
Peaks,
of the
even though
time.
it's not winter, it's still very cold just because of what they are. It's a lot worse in winter, but yeah, they were still having to deal with some exhaustion checks, even though they're low DCs. But yeah, when it turned out that like 2 characters didn't pack food at all, and that was
we were running slim for a while.
I think y'all carved something up, as I recall.
Yeah, we carved. I don't remember. It was one we had wolves, and that was one of the
Yeah.
things I liked about this little arc was I understand like in a story you're traveling from here to here and there's a road. Okay, this you can do that in RP. But here the journey was just as much a part of the adventure as the destination was.
It was.
And that made it more fun, made it more memorable.
None Shall Pass was a journey. It was a journey adventure because you had to go through the hidden pass in the Gossamer Peaks, which was key. But then you came out and I guess for this group, these were some of my favorite episodes. The first one was Monastery of the Distressed Body. Yeah. So this was the floating island that was made out of some sort of spacecraft or something. But to get there, you had to riddle the Gynosphinx and ask it a riddle that it couldn't answer, and that was actually kind of funny. It was backwards.
Yeah, that took a little outside of the box thinking there, or outside of the game room thinking.
And this is where you had discovered that people would either journey here of their own accord, or they were kidnapped and brought here. One of 2 things. And the Cult of the Black Earth was kind of using this as a conversion station to whip up these monks to their side, and that's where some of their monk army came from. Well, not army, but they're monk people. And this is where, when you got over there, the first thing that y'all did is you were invited to meet the Grandmaster, and y'all were like, yeah, sure, we'll go right there.
That's right. We had the big fight first.
So the big fight happened first instead of, looking around the whole island. And I got pictures of this one. Actually, let's see. Well, there's the Pact of Evil. And there's the None Shall Pass picture with the Guardian, and this is the bones with the.
We went around the Guardian like, there's no reason to fight this guy. Let's get out of here.
Tried to run around the Guardian, maybe blocked you off. After y'all fell down the rope again, there's another rope falling incident. Gravity is a harsh mistress.
Yeah, but our next rope was excellent.
I know, right? And here we go. Here was the Monastery of the Distressed Body. So this big island was laid out before them. And when they got there, there's these monks doing things and whatnot. And a monk asks them, hey, you want to come see the Grandmaster? And they're like, yeah, let's do that first before we check out anything. So it turns out to be the big boss fight right off the bat. So instead of going around and working your XP and having a rest and gaining level or something, it's like, no.
Yeah.
And this
was a tough one, too. We almost all went down, I think, except for our wizard.
Reamer, yep, Bladesinger.
He was the only one standing.
Everybody was down, and the Bladesinger had, I think, 1 hit point. And it came down to basically, he needed to hit him like once or twice, and the guy could have hit Reamer once or twice, but with shield and blade singing, his AC could get so high that he had a hard time hitting.
The mirror image thing, too.
And a mirror image, too. Yeah, he had a mirror image. This is where Xanthos, Protection of Evil, or Smite.
Smite, lots of smites.
Well, then he dropped his protection from evil, and as soon as he did, it was like smack, smack, smack.
Yeah. Well, I forgot who I was trying to help. Someone had gotten in trouble.
It's probably me.
I wanted to help them out, and then I realized that's how I need to just be the wall and stay there.
because the Grandmaster was a mechanical body, but it was being piloted by a fiend. So your protection from evil was causing him disadvantage to attack you, and as soon as you dropped it, well, then he didn't have disadvantage anymore, and all of a sudden the hits started landing.
It hurts.
Yeah, and
Learned my lesson.
Yeah, he was down. The cleric was down. The fighter was down. The rogue was down. Everybody's like making death saves, and and Reamer, the blade singer, was dancing away, but he did it. He pulled it off. This is also where you discovered the. This one was kind of complicated, actually. This whole environment was.
This was my favorite adventure.
Yeah, cool.
Right here.
This was definitely the most memorable. I agree. There were a lot of good ones, but I felt like this episode is when the party started to come together as far as understanding what each other could do, and we still had a lot of miscommunications, but we finally started working together a lot better.
This was I think it was a Hard Knocks episode. After learning what you did wrong, and then it's like right after that, as you went about clearing the rest of the island, the monastery, you started to get kind of crackerjack when it came to the other monks in the other locations. It was like, okay, those were gone, and it was like after that first one, it was like, okay, guys, step back, analyze, go forward. This is also where you found the brains in a jar that were connected to the island. And you found Vistra, who was the paladin from the Saren Defenders. She had lost her soul. She had lost her soul to the deck of many things. At
this point, because I think we knew this by this point because we'd already had a face-to-face, our first face-to-face dinner meeting.
Yes.
And so we had met with each other at a restaurant and chit-chatted about stuff and exchanged items and so forth.
Yep. Yeah, actually, you guys did trade magic items with another group. That was one of the things when there was, I think, as you traveled through Glissandel is where we had the meeting at Glissandel, and that's where we all met at the restaurant, all three groups. So we basically, all three groups were at the same location at the same time. So we decided to have a lunch, and we all met at the restaurant. And that
a lot of good information exchange and so forth.
Yeah. Hey, Voodoo is here. Hi, thanks for joining us. Yes, this was you rescuing the soul of another character from another group. And you also kind of learned that the island is mechanical, like, basically like a spacecraft of some sort. And that's how it's floating, is the brains in a jar run the systems that keep it floating, or less it would crash down into a deep gorge. And you also learned that...
But in the second age, who knows?
I know, right? Plot hook. You also learned that the Grandmaster you had encountered was not the first Grandmaster. His brain was in a jar, and that this fiend had come along and taken it over. And he had driven off Qualesh, and Qualesh had fled east. So Qualesh was no longer here. He had fled east, and so off to the east you went. You followed to the east, on Qualesh's trail. And honestly, this is probably one of my favorite setups we did on Qualesh's trail. So this was the Ooze City.
I think it'd be good to mention, is this where we had the deck?
Not yet. It was at the end of this one, is where the deck of many things comes in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
This is where it comes in, yes.
Oh, Qualesh, that's right. You mentioned Qualesh. It was later.
Yeah, it was in his lab in this episode. And so it was episode 6. You guys are about 5th level now or so. And
somewhere in there, yeah.
Yeah, you're chasing Yarsha, and you come across the Ooze City that has the mechanical kraken that's flying above it. And so if it spots you, it comes down, right, and tries to attack you. So you were kind of, climbing across these rooftops because the ooze had filled the city up about 30 feet. And come to find out later, it was a giant gelatinous cube that they had, what had gone on here in the whole story is there was a uprising at a certain point in time. And in that battle, they had punctured a hole into the plane of ooze. And this large, giant gelatinous cube had basically 30 feet high had consumed all the city. So if they fell in it, it's acid. And if they tried to use their boat, these acid pseudopods would try to attack them. So they would use these little ladders and ropes high above the ooze to basically try to climb and whatnot. So if you're looking at the board here, the city is basically built 30 feet off the ground, right? So where the water line is, that's where the ooze stops. And then these are the very tops of buildings that are sticking out, but there's 30 more feet down that they could go.
Tactically, this was a big change up because you had no ground literally to fight on. You're moving from rooftop to rooftop. Ranged was about all you could do, and we're trying to figure out you either got to stay out of sight, where there's no cover. It was, your movement was very restricted, so it was definitely a challenge.
Yeah, this one was.
Yeah, it was one misty step away from losing Xanthos on one of those checks.
That's right.
Otherwise, he'd have been dissolved away in the ooze.
Oh, that's right. You went down in the stuff too, didn't you? Oh, I forgot about that.
And this was you're seeing glass statues that had armature inside them. So you're coming across, and then some of them weren't glass, some of them were crystal, and that kind of came into play later. But
added a spookiness to it.
Yeah, it added. It's like, why do these glass statues have armature inside them? Well, come to find out that the glass statues could be penetrated by ooze beings and then kind of come to life and attack, which is what they would do, especially if somebody touched the ooze. So they learned very quickly, don't touch the ooze, it's bad because it disturbs it, it wakes them up, they come out, they grab the statues, they fight us. So anything they can do to not fall in the ooze was a good thing. But they couldn't figure out what the crystal statues were at first. And there were only a few. There was out of the whole place, there might have been 50 regular statues, but only 6 crystal ones. And you eventually tracked down Yarsha. Y'all had found where they camped, and you found them in the big main tower that was there in the middle. And that's where you went up and you took Yarsha out and his people, which basically killed their aspirations for knowledge because they were looking for knowledge from Qualesh to try to, increase their power. So you kind of took them out.
And we could have stopped there.
Yeah. And then at the top of the tower, you learned that there was it was like a mechanical Medusa machination, right? This was the undead Medusa machination that Qualesh had actually created. And it became a point of rebellion between this creature and another creature, which comes up in a minute. But the mechanical machination actually stoned the poor rogue. So this is where we lost Mayhem.
Lost our first party member.
Yep, first party member down. Another stoned. It's I think the first death in every group was petrification.
It turned him to crystal.
Yeah, here it turned him to crystal. Or turned him to glass. Which I think Bevier still has the glass statue.
Is this the one where the phrase, I close my eyes, becomes very important?
What's that?
Is this the one where the phrase, I avert my eyes, becomes very important?
Yes, this is where that was very important.
Yeah. We actually couldn't bring the statue back. There were things that will be discussed earlier. We couldn't bring it up. We got it out of the tower and we got it near the entrance to the valley, and there it still rests.
Yes.
But if I remember the fight right, just things were not going well with this one anyway. And poor Mayhem ended up being one of the only ones in the room, I think. And just kind of toward that part of the fight, and he just ended up bearing the brunt of it.
And he was
one bad roll away.
He was wagering that he could face it and not avert his eyes and make his saving throws, and that wager failed.
Yeah, that did not work.
Yeah, caught up to him there, and but the rest of you finally managed to defeat it, and then you discovered that. Let's see, the workshop that you found had the clockwork kraken, which y'all had fought, briefly and destroyed it. It was repairing itself, and you went in there and took it out, and discovered a halfling cleric. So this was a cleric who, one of the other players who joined the party. That was actually, I think, his second character. And it was caught in a portal trap. And that had a stone sarcophagus in the floor. So this was where the vampire spawn had the astral strands that were attached to him, the astral cords, because those astral cords were what controlled the city's defense mechanisms, and particularly the ooze creatures, right? So this was the guy who had actually started the rebellion against the Medusa machination. So those two were on opposite sides, and they were fighting. And he lost, and his punishment was basically to be entombed and for his body to work as this defense mechanism. So this is, this is
He was kind of a jerk.
Yeah, this is what the loser got, right? So he was forever trapped in this tomb, right? So this became kind of a conundrum, I think, for the paladin, because it's like, if you free him, you're freeing a vampire spawn. But if you don't free him, those ooze creatures will keep inhabiting the glass statues and keep attacking us. And here's where you came across the famous apparatus of Qualesh.
Ah, yes. Handles like a dream.
Yeah. So the problem was,
Little
you
did
had
we know
the
how important
apparatus.
that would be.
Right?
What's that?
Little did we realize how important that would be for the rest of the campaign.
I know, right? It did. It really did. So the problem was two of them got in the apparatus, and they figured out that the apparatus had the ability to penetrate dimensional pockets. It was the only thing that could penetrate the dimensional pocket within a crystal statue. So those statues that they had passed, there were like 6 of them. Yeah, and one of them had the dimensional pocket, which Qualesh's laboratory was inside. So 2 of them set out to basically try to find the right crystal statue. But the problem was the glass statues kept aggroing and beating the crap out of the apparatus. They kept having to fight. So finally, I don't know, I forgot who it was. They made the decision to free the vampire spawn so that the glass statues would stop attacking the apparatus.
I can't remember. It was not a universal decision,
but it was free the fiend or let your friends die. You have to.
I seem to recall.
You have to make choices.
Yeah.
I want to say someone was standing in the back. It might have been Durnavir.
There's a little conflict with Durnavir too.
He's not here, so you can just blame it on him. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, he saved the other people's life because I seem to recall that everything, the thing was taking a beating. It was underwater or under ooze or whatever.
Right. So this was quite the episode. This whole episode was quite. Braylon's like, this one's pretty cool. This one was very cool, and it was complicated. But when you think about the legend of Qualesh, it needed to be complicated to a certain point. But sure enough, they located the proper crystal statue. They managed to get into the legendary laboratory of Qualesh, in which they went back and shuttled everybody else in. And they found the legendary machine that was in there, and this had the toggle, which they pulled the toggle, and there appeared the deck of many things.
Oh, yes.
So, backstory. I don't know if you saw the other recaps or not, but the Deck of Many Things was first introduced by fiends in order to get the Dragon Slayers of Velspar to kind of destroy themselves, which it kind of did in a way. It took them a whole adventure to kind of rectify themselves. But then the Dragon Slayers of Velspar threw it into the Well of Lost Souls, in which it came into the possession of the Saren Defenders. Well, when you guys pulled the toggle, the Deck of Many Things, which one of the Saren Defenders had in his pocket, it transported from there to Qualesh's lab. So, of course, as a DM, I went into D&D Beyond and character sheet and remove. And of course, it took him, like 6 adventures to figure out it was gone.
See, I knew one of the parties had it, that particular one. I didn't know that previously this was passed through all 3 parties. Okay.
Yes, it had gone through all 3 parties. So this was the funny one where Reamer's sitting there telling everybody that if they all draw from it, everybody needs to draw from it.
I wasn't going to draw.
Pressure.
Yep. He was needling the paladin and needling the paladin. And what did you draw?
I drew pretty well. I drew, I think 10,000 XP.
Yep, 10,000 XP.
That's-
And that immediately put you a level ahead of everybody.
Everyone else. Pretty nice.
And
Well, you drew something else too, didn't you? Draw 2 cards.
no, I think you just drew 1.
Okay.
But
Maybe it was Durnavir that drew. I drew 2. I don't remember what one of them was. It must not have been horrible. It wasn't great. And then the other one broke me. Took all my money anywhere away. So,
right.
didn't end up coming out well, but not fatal.
So Durnavir drew the gems card, which was basically 50,000 GP worth of gems. Which was funny because that card was drawn by all 3 groups. Somebody in each group drew that card. And then Durnavir followed that up by drawing the stars, or the moon, which is 2 wishes. So...
Is it 2 wishes?
He did really well.
2 wishes.
Okay.
Yeah, remember, because those come into play a lot later.
Yes.
I couldn't remember if it was 2 or 3.
He had 2.
No, 2.
He had 2.
He saved them.
Uh,
Well, I know, because throughout the adventure, whenever we'd have something really tough, we said, if only we had a wish. To get
Right?
us out of here."
Did he draw two cards or 3 cards?
2
I cannot
cards.
remember.
Durnavir
Just
took 2
okay.
cards.
You
And
took
both
2
were
cards.
good. Both were probably some of the best ones you can draw. I mean, 10,000 XP is a pretty good one, too.
Yeah.
But,
And
there's-
then
And then everybody had drawn except for the guy who was pressuring everybody to draw. And so they all turned on him and is like, well, you have to draw. And what does
We
he?
were going to throw him out of the room if he didn't draw a card.
Yeah. You gotta
And he
draw a card.
draws, get his soul sucked. Body function, soul trapped elsewhere. And Reamer's body hits the ground.
That was, and that was right at the end of the session. That was the end of the day.
Yeah.
So that was a kick in the pants. I mean, even I wasn't my character, and even I felt that. I was driving home thinking, oh man, just one freaking card, one card.
It
And
was.
Xanthos
gone.
had a great idea at that point, which almost got my alignment changed. We have all these extra brains just lying around in jars. You know,
Just pop his
Who's gonna
skull
know?
and toss one in there and see what happens.
You know, what could go wrong?
I mean, that's where we got one of the brains to mix. Anyway,
Yeah, you're carrying one with you at the moment.
Soul,
We could have had 2 paladins. Just pop a
we have a
paladin brain
body
in.
with no soul. It seemed to make so much sense.
I know, right? But that was that. And, having had success, having stopped Yarsha, the cult's quest for knowledge, you had found this legendary apparatus of Qualesh, and you journeyed back home. And so we had another journey adventure. Since you guys were actually quite the ways out there in the Gossamer Peaks.
Yeah.
So what took the whole
Bittersweet.
adventure?
We still got we're down 2 party members too, hauling a body for one of them.
Right. So behind the scenes, you guys had, been out way too long and overdue. And so since Bevier had joined Adventurers Anonymous, Lady Natalia Humboldt had sent out another small group, ergo the new party members to...
How convenient.
Yeah, how convenient to find them. And they had made it as far as the Monastery of the Distressed Body, which when this group's coming back and that group's going forward, they met up. And of course, that group had more adventurers who had died on the way, and there were some air elementals blocking the way. I think I might have some pictures of that one. Let's see here. Yeah, there's the apparatus, the old apparatus. And
It's a subcompact model.
yeah, that's the the half conversion. So, and then then you guys basically, make a long story short on this one, the journey home was to get you back to Glissondale. And Durnavir, of course, all rich and stuff, decides to build himself a house. And,
Parades, so forth.
yeah. And then this actually kind of closed off since you guys, the Cult of Black Earth was more essential. Saren Defenders were very kind of front and center on the Cult of the Black Earth arc. And you guys had stopped one wing of it, the Quest for Knowledge, and the Dragon Slayers of Velspar had stopped their quest for power. for the power items. Then and the Saren Defenders kind of took care of the rest. This is kind of turning a page, and this is where you, out of a course of circumstance, you run into Errol, who is a guy who has basically, his friend had disappeared, and he stumbled across a mystery in the Candlelight Library where he met a ghost, Sarah, who had a tragic story. So this is this is starting something by a happenstance, if you will, because this whole book 2, Faces of Evil, really begins the whole chromatic arc with the dragons, but it all kind of starts on a happenstance, because if you follow this one along, Errol, who had disappeared because of an an old murder mystery, if you will. This was kind of a murder mystery adventure. Y'all remember this one, The Disappearance of Durs. The Lord Yellowcrest, who had been leagued with the Great Old One, an outer planar entity, to give him power. Y'all remember that one?
Yep.
Yes, but I mean, we found that out later.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and this started a number of individual ones. Individual episodes that they had different bits and pieces and threads, like you said, that were leading to something later. But each was, in some ways, like an adventure in and of itself.
It was.
Not every episode had to be this big world-ending plot type thing.
Right.
You know, it's like the characters walked through the world and different things were happening to them at this, that weren't necessarily large scale.
Yeah, this one all by itself was very self-contained. The thing that came out of this adventure, when it was all said and done, was the fact that Furl, the fancy elf, he had gotten away. So, he was nowhere to be found. And that was really kind of the big thing, I guess, that led to the next adventure. But this one was all about basically, finding somebody who was deceased, giving them a proper burial so that the servant girl's spirit could be set free. It was very, very Netflix spooky storybook, if you will. One of those nice that had that ending that was like, oh, it's like, oh, they're all free now. It's really kind of a happy, self-contained little adventure. But for once again, the fancy elf who had worked for Yellowcrest was the guy that was collecting the dues in the town, who y'all followed back to the village, where you found the underground temple, where you stopped your Lord Yellowcrest, and you uncovered the murder mystery of what had happened years ago, where he sacrificed his own family and servants. You pieced all the clues together, and you basically solved a Glissondale murder that had gone unsolved for years, and so you got renowned for that. And it was like, oh, that was awesome. And then I forget the reason you guys went to Solomir. It escapes me at the moment. But
we were sent there for something. I can't remember what it was.
Exactly,
and Farrell happened to be there. We ran across him.
But when you were in there, that's when you see Furl again. And you see him, and he sees you, and he takes off running. And there's a fight. Once again, a fight in the city where y'all kill people, just like the Dragon Slayers. So Dragon Slayers, you're not the only ones that kill people in a city.
Hey, they threw a spell first. That's all I'm going to say.
That's everybody's defense. They threw a spell first.
They started it.
But the Fellhammer Five managed to kind of bribe and talk their way out of.
That's all I'm saying. Paladins don't have fireballs.
Paladins don't have fireballs.
Hey, I threw one javelin and killed the guy. Come on.
I had no idea he only had one hit point. I mean, what am I supposed to do?
One lousy javelin. One lousy Lorax.
It's his fault for not having a constitution.
Right.
So this was the one where when you went out into the woods chasing Furl, he had come across this campsite, and there were orcs, and you fought them, and that campsite had the mysterious green flame.
Oh no. No.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Look, no one said the paladin was smart.
That's true.
He's wise.
He's wise
brave.
and charismatic and strong.
He's strong.
But intelligence isn't supposed to be the app.
That's
So-
my strong
so-
suit.
This
Don't
is
be
the one.
mighty over there.
This is the
But
one
technically, I
where.
don't think it was the paladin that did it. I think it was the ranger, but
It was.
Yeah, it was the
actually
ranger
Yes.
that did the ultimate act. Yes, it was. The
But I
this,
can't blame the guy for what happened.
No,
it
this was.
seemed like the thing to do at the time.
It was.
seemed like
It
the
was.
thing.
It was conditioning at the highest. So the Kortosh, as you had all learned later on, that the dragons who had encased themselves in the crystal would be resurrected or reincarnated as some kind of animal or creature or something, and they would live and maybe die. And if they died, they got reincarnated again. Well, finally, Kortosh got reanimated as a man. So he could talk, he could do things, he could learn things, and he became an illusionist. And he laid an elaborate trap, which was to condition a good aligned humanoid to destroy the green flame or the green crystal. So he had these things out there, and of course, when you killed them, their spirits flew back to it, and they'd come alive again. And you guys quickly learned to put out the fire and kill them all. It was like, yeah, this is easy. And so I think y'all had the plan of send the ranger in to start sniping and get them to run away, and y'all circle around and would run in and kick dirt on the fire and put it out.
Something like that, yeah.
Put it out. Yeah, we're putting out fires.
Yeah, so instead of having a big fight or charging in, you kind of lured them away and then ran in and put the fire out. And you did it 3 times, and then you went into the middle where the little cobalt encampment was. And it dropped out, and it dropped you into, down here, it dropped you into the
fell into the pit.
the pit. And that's where it's like,
Falling in the pit.
the conjurer says, protect the crystal at all costs. So what does the ranger do?
Now, and yeah,
Seemed like
I
the
mean,
thing to do at the time.
there was not a lot of discussion. You know, we could have talked about this destroying crystal, but no, the ranger said, "I got this.
I got
This
this."
is what the ranger said.
Well, we were in the middle of a fight at the time, and it wasn't going badly, but it wasn't going great either. So
Yeah, it could have gone a lot worse after the crystal incident. So he runs over
this
and
is true.
it smashes it, which killed the illusionist. You know, it did just kill the illusionist as the dragon erupted from his chest.
Yes.
At this point, the
Right.
fighter ran like hell for the only exit.
Yeah, I think all of y'all ran. It's like you ran into the tunnel to get away from it. And so it roared and it flew off, happy to be free. And kind of unbeknownst to you at the time, Kortosh, the released green dragon, he ran off to free Darnath, who was the black dragon. And Darnath went and in turn freed Mogili and Agramar, while Kortosh went and freed Igriestor, which is the blue dragon.
Okay.
And then Kortosh, Agramar, and Mogili, summoned their minions because they actually had, decent followers, and they were going to attack the Fall Festival. Which brings us to the next episode, the Fall of the Festival. Bum, bum, bum. This might be the last one.
This one was
The
a lot
most
of fun.
gruesome. I mean, that's the most HBO, Netflix. That's the one where you get Game of Thrones. Everybody's Game of Thrones kind of carnage.
It was horde after horde after horde, and with a chance of a dragon to come in and strafe or to come in and roar. And you guys actually didn't do too bad when it came into the dragons coming in and strafing and roaring. Actually, I think you guys might have had the least encounters with dragons, which was fortunate because you were the lowest level.
Yeah, we did okay on that one.
Unlike the Dragon Slayers who had every single, they rolled, their rolls were so good that they got every single breath and every single roar. So all 6.
Well, and for the people that, or the people, someone watching that aren't familiar, the Fall Festival, all the groups were there. We weren't all at the same spot in town.
Right.
But the same incident was happening to everybody.
Yeah.
In different areas.
So
I really love the open terrain on this and all the NPC interaction. The difference. This was chaos. It was just chaos everywhere.
It was.
And it wasn't just the dragons; it was coordinated attacks with with orcs, I think, and other.
Well, the first one was orcs.
And just villagers just dying left and right. It was awful.
And the party's scattered. We're all across this three. I can't remember how wide the town area was. 3 foot by 6 foot or whatever. We're all scattered across this area.
Yeah, it's like it's 4 foot by 6, I think. That's how big the terrain map was. It was
the
4 by 6. And so, I had basically watched everybody, this is what I'm doing on that day. This is what I want to do. And so you guys had your characters, shopping or at the sermon or doing something. And then, of course, the horde breaks out. And orcs come in from one side. And then there's like a couple of rounds. And then the gnolls come in from the south side. So it's kind of funny because some groups, they didn't ever really like centralize, but like one group, after the orcs came in, they ran all the way to the north because they thought the second wave was coming from the north too. And it turned out it was coming from the south, so it mowed over half of the NPCs before they could get across and get to it. So it was
Xanthos got to break out his stallion at this point and charge across.
This was right. Yeah, the fine
handy in that fight.
Yeah. I liked a lot of this open ground here. This was good. And I'm going to say that preacher needs his own episode in the second age because he stood there delivering his sermon the whole time, never broke.
Yep.
I think he survived.
I think that was no, it wasn't Bethany. It was somebody else, but it was just another. Basically, somebody giving a sermon on a mound, and he'd just stand there. It's like too petrified to run. I think he froze in the very first round, and so he never moved.
That could be it.
So this was the fall of the festival. It was big. It was disruptive. A bunch of NPCs died. There was a big fallout here, and of course, all 3 groups were involved. And
it felt like a desperate fight. It really did.
That's good. Because it was supposed to.
And it was the beginning of hard times for the valley.
Yes, yeah. And then the overall arc.
I didn't really address that a lot in the other 2 streams. To basically say, because we did talk a little bit about how winter is 4 months out of the year, but the fall festival is in the center of the valley, and it's where all the towns kind of come to trade for winter. So they're prepping for winter. So they're trading their last goods, and everybody's stocking up. Well, with this festival being interrupted and basically so many death and destruction, it really disrupted supplies for winter. So the valley was going to come on hard times just from this fall festival. So that was the first one, and then we go into a little bit more later. We'll touch on that one in a couple of episodes. But right after the fall festival, all 3 groups were kind of given the opportunity to strike back, a little morale boost for the valley, because there was still like a couple of weeks until winter was going to get super heavy and impassable. And this party went after the Warrens, which were down in the crags. So you went after the gnolls. So this one was just kind of straightforward, I guess, in a way. Gnoll Warrens are kind of under the grounds of the crag hills, and you found their home. And you also managed to rescue one of the people that was kidnapped from the fall festival there. But you didn't find a dragon. You found one of his, I guess, lieutenants or main people. It was a Winter Eladrin who was down there. The only dragon that I had planned was at the Caves of Chaos, which actually, truth be told, I thought that's where you guys were going to go. As a DM and I was betting, I thought you guys were going to pick the Caves of Chaos. But I think the Dragon Slayers talked you out of it because, for whatever reason, they had the hard on for the Caves of Chaos. I was like, that's...
Well, I don't remember. I think we had captured the Knoll at the Fall Festival, so I think that kind of led us maybe in that direction.
I think that might have had something to do with it too, because you did actually take a prisoner at the Fall Festival, and you took a Knoll.
And I think someone spoke Knolls. I thought we had
we did some questioning. Somebody had a spell or something that did a translation. So I think that led us in the direction of
right. I think you used tongues or something in order to do it. So you guys went after them and basically struck back at the Knolls, which put a dent in them, even though you didn't find a dragon. But you did manage to defeat the Gnolls there in the Warrens, which were the Gnolls that basically had raided Emdel. So struck back, and then you basically went off to Glissendale.
And we got some prisoners.
Yes, and got some prisoners, freed some prisoners.
Yeah.
And you basically went off to Glissendale for winter.
So you recall a fighter breaking the cage open. Just,
Yep.
something like that.
That's because I think at this point, this was the only group that didn't have a rogue.
We did not.
Yeah.
We had a
crowbar.
We had six. We had 6 players or 6 party members, but no rogue.
No rogue. So, but they had a crowbar and lots of strength.
Say you don't need a rogue. You need a warhammer and a lot of determination.
So this, actually, a little antecedent, since Lord Commander is mentioning a Second Age character. So in where the Dragon Slayers were fighting, one militia man survived, just like that priest did. One militia guy survived the whole dang thing. And so Kel, being a noble, just thought, he's like, I'm just going to knight this guy and we'll see what happens. Well, it turned out the knighting took and it stuck and the council approved it. And that is the character that one of the players is going to be playing in the Second Age. The guy that got knighted at the Fall Festival. Barry.
Awesome.
Nice.
So, actually, he'll be in your group. So it'll be in the group that you guys are both been playing in. Or actually, it'll be Xanthos' group. Bever's going to be playing in the other group. It'll be in Xanthos' group. So then with the dread of winter. So this was kind of, you stumble across a string of robberies. So now, behind the scenes, the hand has gotten involved, and they're going to snatch food to basically put the squeeze. Since the economy is already being squeezed from the Fall Festival, they're going to put the super squeeze on it by stealing food and rations away from town. So they were positioned all over the valley in order to do this. And it took the Fellhammer Five a little while to set up a sting operation.
Now
Yeah.
The trick was, how do we know where to do it? And we just sort of had to find a spot where they hadn't been yet, and I hope that's where they hit.
This was a lot of cross information with checking the website, which the website, for anybody watching that hasn't checked it, fantastic. Not just for information on player building and so forth, there's that, but to help keep engaged between sessions and see what's around. Really like a lot of the self-contained episodes, like going to the town. It helps kind of flesh out the world, which was nice. Gives it some flavor.
So you guys played once a month too, like the Dragon Slayers did. The Saren Defenders played weekly, so you guys did have the long kind of there'd be a couple weeks in between game sessions, if not even usually, more. Yeah. And a lot of the RP that we would handle online, so that when we got together on a game day, and our game days were like 6 to 8 hours or so. When we got together, we were pretty much ready to throw dice, like kind of from the word go, because all the RP had been handled offline. So a lot of this was very RP heavy to get to the point to where you were actually in the right place with the right sting operation in order to bust the doppelganger, or the thief, as it were, which you guys, then found out it was a doppelganger. And
I think we might have spent the most time on RP on this particular, building up to this particular one.
I think so too, because you're chasing your tail on where to go and what to do. And at first it was like, well, we'll tell the militia about it. And after a day, they didn't do anything. It hit again. It's like, okay, well, that didn't work. So maybe we do need to get involved. So I had a countdown.
We did sort of get it wrapped around. How could they do it? Were they magicians, or are they invisible? Are they hypnotizing or possessing, charming people?
Well, you had the Gem of Seeing too. I think that's what it really helped.
And we needed that.
Yes. So this group, you spotted them coming, because with the Gem of Seeing, you could always see, and you weren't relying on like seeing invisible only lasts for so long, right? And since they were doing it at 3 a.m. with the Gem of Seeing, you were like, there comes somebody. And
it just took a lot of work to get around to figuring out where to do it and what was going on.
Yeah. But you finally did in the nick of time. And then, of course, then there's the hand that had taken out. They killed a husband, cloned the wife, stole the child, and then they were using their house as a setup. And you went out and you took them out, and that's kind of how you learned the hand was involved because they had this hand tattoo. And then,
and as a matter, and I will point out the fact that the DM had the trapped widow had point out how many days she had spent trapped down there and waiting to be rescued. It was pretty harsh.
Yep. She's like, I've been down here for 5-6 days waiting. Just bleeding hearts. And then, of course, at the very end of it, she's like, and where's the baby? And they're all like, what baby? And they're like, oh, crap.
Damn it.
Now the kidnappings started to build up. We started to see a pattern in kidnappings. Like, what's with the kidnappings? I mean, did they need slaves or not? Are they eating them? I mean, what's going on here?
So behind the scenes, there was going to be a mass sacrifice as an act. And it would all come down to the group that was going to go after Darnath, which it turned out it ended up being the Saren Defenders. And they were going to they were going to do a sacrifice with Drow allies. And the Saren Defenders disrupted it. They didn't waste their time in the dungeon, which was good. And they managed to get to the children in time and free them so that never happened. Or else you would have seen a lot more Drow become involved, and this thing would have probably drug out a little longer. But one of those things.
Yeah, because they were. We ran into the Drow over in one of the previous episodes.
Yes.
We ran into a couple.
I think all three groups touched on the Drow just a little bit. So, like, these three groups, for the most part, kind of know Drow exist. You don't really see them in the valley. So most people don't even realize that they're out there. But these three groups all barely touched them as kind of, they were associating with whoever they were going against. So it touched on them. But that's where the children were going. And it was something that y'all as a collective, managed to stop before something could happen. The dread of winter basically led to, more food shortage, a little more stress on the economy, and there was an attack. Actually, Glissondale didn't have a dragon near it, so there was no dragon attack at the end of this one, because y'all had chosen a city to winter in where a dragon was not close by. So, ergo, all the other towns, when the signal arrow was fired off, the dragon would come in and then run an attack on the town in order to help kind of cover the retreat. But Glissondale didn't have one, so y'all picked the one that didn't have a dragon, so y'all kind of lucked out in that way. Didn't have to deal with it. Then you were recruited to go kill the blue dragon. So
Dum, dum, dum.
This is where let's see, I'm trying to think. No, this isn't quite yet the episode where you learn everything about Avantgarde. That comes later. But here's where...
That's after.
Yeah, that's after this. So this is where you guys had to go to Snowshore Harbor. And you were the first group, actually, to go to Snowshore Harbor. So you were the first group to really experience kind of full-on the social aspects of Snowshore Harbor.
Not a fan. Don't want to go back.
The Saren Defenders went. The Saren Defenders did end up in Snowshore Harbor, but they went very incognito and didn't really experience any of the social life. But you guys met Marquesa. You learned about that. You actually met one of the Pots.
Bar brawl. It was fun.
Go ahead.
Said had a bar brawl. It was fun.
Yeah, you actually had one. This is one of the only groups I think that had just a full-on fisticuffs bar brawl. Where everybody it's like no weapons. Everybody just went fisticuffs because everybody had weapons on them, but nobody drew them, so you guys didn't draw them, and everybody was just going fisticuffs.
Just
It was a good old-fashioned
beat the
bar
crap
brawl.
out of everybody.
So what did you think of Snowshore Harbor? Just, I guess, off the cuff.
It has a lot of. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What, as a plot device?
Or player, character,
as a
just in
place to
general. You
retire?
guys are the first ones to really go there, so.
It's where you don't want to be in the valley. It's I'm not sure how well we find out later the couple of families control the whole town, but it's considering that it's access to the rest of the world, it needs to be explored more, because the mountains surround, unless there's a secret mountain pass similar that we find later. The Snowshore Harbor is access to the rest of the world.
Right. So Snowshore Harbor, down here on the map, if you look at the whole, I'll pull up the valley of the map, right? So, the Attican Mountains and the Gossamer Peaks kind of surround the valley, and it comes all the way down to the Eisenberg Sea where Snowshore Harbor is. So they're way down here kind of on their own. The only ones with ships, really.
I think there's a lot of potential there, particularly if you don't have good aligned characters, or if we have like a rogue in the group, something like that. There's a lot of different ways that could play out. It reminds me of Luskin in Forgotten Realms. It's a pirate haven, so forth and so on. There's a seedy underbelly that's not all that underbelly. The whole damn thing is seedy.
Or Tortuga.
Yeah. No man would ever feel unwanted.
So here you actually hired Drask Stormbeard. You found out, this group found out that there's not so much like guild NPCs down here, but there's mercenary NPCs down here. And you ran across several, and you hired one, Drask Stormbeard, the barbarian, to help you go after Igriestor. And that was
It was highly needed.
Yes, was highly needed. So that basically takes us to episode 14, Deep Blue Vengeance, where you go after Igriestor, and this is the famous paladin riding the blue dragon.
It was a great idea.
I've got a picture of it somewhere. I didn't get it to you to include in here, but it's a great picture of the paladin on the back. He didn't stay the whole 8 seconds, so no gold buckle.
It was execution that was the problem.
You got a 6-second ride. The judges are not going to give you good points on that.
Things conspired at the end. I had to give away a bunch of.
So you kind of have to frame this.
Our NPC got hit, so I had to give him a lot of points to keep him going. Then that meant when I got smacked, I was in trouble. Things just sort of cratered there.
So you have to frame this in the picture of the threat was these dragons had a tendency to try to flee once they got bloodied, right? So the whole thought was how do you lock it down, right? So they had the apparatus of Qualesh, which is kind of why they were sent down here, because they had to go underwater to get to these underwater caves, and the apparatus, of course, can swim. And so that was going to be beneficial. B, it's really strong and has 2 grappling claws that it can grapple with. So that was going to be beneficial. And that's, of course, comes to turn out. That's a big deal. And that's, who knew when you found the apparatus of Qualesh that it was going to turn out to be like this big.
Right.
Yeah, it's pivotal.
As pivotal as it became.
And this episode, maybe because it was going up against a dragon, but also with enough time of everyone playing together, I think we did the most preparation.
Probably.
Like, the characters got ready, they got gear, they spell everything. It seemed like this one had the most planning from the character perspective. You don't want to go in there willy-nilly.
Yeah. Yep, of course, because Xanthos had his hooks and his ropes forged. So the Paladin's plan was to make, at first he's asking the DM, it's like, can I make this? And I'm like scratching my head trying to figure out what's he doing? And then it kind of dawned on me at a point.
It's a never
He's trying to
ending
make a
story,
riding
man.
harness
Right.
so that the dragon flies away, he can hold on and still beat on it or something.
Oh, wait, I saw this movie.
Yeah. So, despite the harness not working, I guess the second thing, so when you look back on that episode of Qualesh's Lab where you got the apparatus and you got the wishes, this is where both wishes were used, was in this fight. Because a party, what level were you? You're probably 7th level, maybe?
At this point, and I jumped really quick. I think I was at 8th level.
Maybe
Xanthos
8.
was at 9. Everybody else was at 7 because they came in later.
Yeah, it's somewhere in there. But this is an adult blue dragon, and this is no easy win. The first wish that he used was to make everybody in the party immune to lightning. Just completely negated the dragon's breath,
Hallelujah.
which lasts via the wish rules. It lasts for like 8 hours. So totally immune to lightning. And then the second one he used was for a complete party heal, which basically, brought them all up off. They were all close to down because, they're fighting an adult dragon that has legendary
looking bad.
actions. It's got lair actions.
It's the layer actions that would.
That's
Well,
what.
I mean, the tail slaps too.
Yeah.
I mean, I was on the back of the dragon and got the tail slap.
Yep.
That was mean.
Maybe if our paladin hadn't been trying to ride the dragon, I don't know. The whole time.
Hey, it was a great idea. But
Good idea when
like
you thought
could
of it.
Make the ceiling collapse. That was rough.
Yeah, darn it. One of our party was pinned under the rocks and still doing stuff.
That was Durnavir.
throwing
He was under the
spells,
rocks making
yeah.
wishes. And you had Santee and you had Reamer in the apparatus who'd managed to run up and grapple the dragon, so the dragon couldn't move at all. And so when you look at the rules, you can use your whole action to break a grapple, or you can just attack. Well, it doesn't want to waste its whole action to try to break a grapple, so it's attacking. And it was trying to kill the apparatus, which
And it beat the crap out of it.
it
got
did,
down.
but that thing has a lot of hit points too. So
It probably took it down to about 25%, if I remember right.
I think so.
It took a lot to repair it.
It did. But the party was victorious and they slayed an adult blue dragon. That was actually, that was impressive. Very impressive.
Oh, and we found the Wormsbane after we slew the dragon.
This is
We'd
true.
have gone the other way around. There were 2 ways to go. Now, let's go to the left. We've gone to the right.
That's
We might
right.
have found the sword
Went
first.
the wrong way again.
Well,
basically,
you
yeah.
did, but you didn't, right? Because this was the short way to the dragon, so you weren't that worn down by the time you got there, too. So
True.
it was one of those,
Yeah,
you were kind of almost full up. It was really like,
were,
the third encounter?
That's true.
Yeah, we took a beating with some of the little side chambers
Yeah.
on there. Whew.
So you went in and cleared out the rest of it. So that could have gone a lot different, but it was one of those where in the dungeon they could have gone left or they could have gone right. If they went left, the dragon was like only 2 or 3 encounters
2
away.
rooms in, yeah.
Yeah, where if they went to the right, it was like 6 rooms in, and so they went left, and so they were pretty much almost full up when they hit it.
Couple of tough ones on
Yeah,
that path.
there were some
around
tough
to
ones on the right side. So then you went to enter the dragon. So this is where you learned kind of the whole world or the Saren Valley backstory, if you will. So in your party was kind of interesting. You only really had one character who experienced the old man because of the way the party was made up. The cleric came along later, so the old man had already kind of been established, and you didn't have a rogue. You had no nobles, and so the fighter. So Bevier was the only one that was kind of chosen because he was a fighter. And so Bevier, what was kind of, your experience with the old man? As that developed over time, what was your thought?
It was hard to figure out where he was coming from because he popped in pretty early on.
Yeah.
He would show up on the street and turn around and be gone. He would show up in a in a tavern. Oh, hey, and, whisper some cryptic words or give a little bit of advice, and then he was gone again. You never saw him. no name given, anything. So you had no clue. Was he good? Was he bad? Was he neutral? What was he there for? And,
right.
And always had that knowing look and that knowing tone in the conversations. And now, ta-da.
And so, here's where you learn about Shard. You learn about Selenia. So you learn the old man is actually a silver dragon. And what did you think about the world setup, the whole world discovery? Despite the fact that Xanthos might not have been there because he kept saying the only good dragon's a dead dragon.
It's a dead dragon. But you have to let them know that's because I was carrying the Wormsbane at the time, and that went along. That was one of the flaws.
Yeah.
Flaw.
It was an interesting setup. We've got, as we went through here, there's this cataclysm catastrophe altering the world. So there's a lot of potential for seeing how things develop here in the valley, but also outside the valley.
Yes.
How far widespread is it? And you've also got the issue with the Qualet, or the Distressed Monastery. Where did that come from?
Yep.
That came down out of a spaceship. How does that interact, or does it at all? So there's a lot of mysteries still left to uncover.
Yep. But as far as you kind of discovered that's like, oh, well, this is why the world is the way it is, because of catastrophe that kind of reset everything, and that's why states of evolution are kind of where they are, even though it's like we have this language, we have this technology, math, and all these things are kind of advanced, but magic is a little behind. Adventuring hasn't really been around. It's like, why is that? So hopefully that kind of answered a lot of those questions as to why. Shard was actually one of my old characters that I ended up playing in 2nd edition. And that's kind of where I drew all this from, is when he retired when that campaign ended, which, we were pretty high level, and he was a cleric of the Red Knight, but he was human. So he was, in 2nd edition, humans, you couldn't multi-class, but you could dual class. And dual class basically meant he started as a fighter and he went up to like fighter level 8. And then you start over again, but your hit points stay where they were. And he started as a thief and he went to like thief level 10. And then he started over again as a cleric and went to cleric level 18. Once your level passed your previous levels, you could now use all the abilities of those previous levels. So once he passed fighter and thief as a cleric, he could now use all of his thief abilities and all of his fighter abilities too. So then they stacked. And that's the way dual classing worked back in the day. And the other thing he had was he had drawn from the deck of many things. He had drawn the Fates card, avoid any situation you choose once. But he never used it. It's like when the campaign ended, it's like I had it and I was like, okay, well, I guess we're done. I'll just hang on to it. And so when I created this world, I was like, what if? What if, because they had done some plane traveling as a group and they had done some world hopping as a group. And I was like, well, what if they had landed on this new planet and then, that's where they're at and they're chilling and all of a sudden, boom, this catastrophe. I was like, avoid any situation you choose once. And so that's kind of how I set the whole world and set it in motion. So just some backstory there. And if some of my buddies who are watching from the day, like Kabath or Lancer or Zork or any of those guys would remember. Thunder was another one. I think Krindor was another one. Some old players that used the game with long ago. That's kind of how I got the idea for this whole world. How to set up a whole, kind of homebrew world. It's like, what am I going to base it off of? Let's base it off of catastrophe. Because the whole idea of this campaign was where you as players were going to be the more powerful creatures. Like, because if I put you in Forgotten Realms, you already know there's 20th level wizards out there. There's your first level. It's like, well, this guy over here can crush you like a bug. It's like, and he's the bartender. It's crazy. So in this campaign, I wanted the adventurers really to be the highest level people where you couldn't run and just get help per se. Which was a little different, I guess, for your group, because for your group, there were higher level adventurers because, you're the third group starting in a campaign that's already been started. But at the same time, most of your NPCs you were dealing with were on your level, or lower.
Yeah. We weren't at cross purposes. We didn't have parties going against each other
No.
yet. Who knows what the future holds?
Second age, maybe? Who knows?
Wow.
So then you went to Enter the Dragon. So your mission, while the other two groups went after the last two adult dragons, your group had a little mystery to solve because of a rumor that they had heard about a possible attack on Avangard. And you guys went into Tindleton. So this was kind of your first infiltration into Tindleton. And behind the scenes, you guys were selected because you guys had not been into Tindleton really very much at all, and you weren't really well
Passed
known
through there, I think.
Yeah, you passed through. Where the other two groups had gone into Tindleton and raised like a ruckus. So one of them had bounties on all of them, and the other one was involved in the independence of Sarenshire, and so they were well known, kind of known in Tindleton. So this group could go in kind of incognito. And you dealt with Radicus, and you learned about the Cult of the Dragon. And this is where you kind of learned about the devastation orbs. So the orbs, you guys actually kind of crossed a little bit with the air cult who was here. So the Cult of the Dragon had kind of enlisted the air cult to kind of help them. I'm sorry, that was the air cult. To kind of help them get a devastation orb to take to Avangard. So this was where you raced back to Avangard in order to stop the destruction of Avangard.
This Tindletown fight was tough. It really was. This was one of the more brutal later fights. The dragon fight was tough, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But this was just wear you down all the way through.
And
we hadn't got to Avangard yet.
So it was one cult after another, and they just kept. I mean, they were all.
Yeah. So each little group of like 5, or like an element of 5, was all. They were all like aligned to a chromatic dragon, right? So you had to deal with the blue one, the red one, the white one, the black one, and then the priests, the heads of the order, and so. Every time you switch, and I think you guys kind of caught on pretty quick, it's like, oh, well, this group's going to be kind of immune to this element, and they're going to use this element. And so you kind of caught on pretty quick, so you didn't really have too many problems dealing with what they were immune to and what they were dishing out.
Nah, just the general damage at all. I remember that Bevier took a beating all the way through here. All the way through.
It was I think it was a lot of the narrow corridors, and being funneled in because they were working in these underground tunnels. And you guys and the Saren defenders can go and talk a lot about that. It's like, oh, those narrow corridors. It's like
choke points.
Yep, choke points.
But you've got a reach weapon.
Yeah, quite a lot of good that did.
Yeah.
If you're the one in front, it doesn't matter. I'm gonna stay in the back next time.
But you did manage to make it
a couple of times.
But you did manage to Avangard and stop it. But that's where you saw. There was another attack that was going on at the main keep, and Avangard had basically been attacked. And then, of course, this is where we had you didn't really know the Fellhammer Five didn't really know what was going on, and they were just guarding the orb at the Church of the Red Knight. So they were just basically going to guard it while Avangard kind of like figured things out. And this is where I did that online meeting. So what did you guys think of the online meeting? Did that work for you? Was that good?
I was finishing up work for the year, so I didn't follow that one as closely as I could. There was a lot of crossover. Finally, I worked through it and figured out what was going on. So yeah, from the beginning, there were difficulties in there, I think, with everybody being in one thread. But it did allow a lot of information to come out and help kind of put the story together.
Well, you're talking about organizing the last.
I'm talking about like the video I did of the video I made of meeting in Avangard.
Oh, okay. I'm totally off then. No, the video, I thought we were talking about the Facebook meeting thread. No, the video was good because it helped put everything together with the pictures and everything. No, that helped kind of tie the storylines together. That was excellent.
Yeah, cool. That was actually pretty cool. But you had to watch the whole video. I didn't watch the whole video the first time. It got confused. But yes, watching the whole video was actually quite a revelation. It sort of revealed, it got everyone to the same point, and then that was very helpful.
Yeah, that was my hope, and because the other part is I'm not sure I could have remembered that monologue like to repeat it over and over, because inevitably I'd do it and somebody goes, "Can you repeat what you said back?" I'll be like, "Ah, shh."
and I did have to backtrack on the video several times.
Yeah, I said several players. They were like, I was able to watch it like 4 times, and it's like take notes. It's like, okay, good. Saved me from repeating it 4 times.
Yeah, I would watch part of it. I'm like, wait a minute, I missed something there. Go back, look at it again. But no, that was also a good way to get things out without it taking time in a session. Yeah, get everything preloaded ahead of time.
That was my hope. So I'm glad that worked out. So the Fellhammer 5 got selected for the glory kill, the final stab into the aspect of Tiamat. So you relied on the Dragon Slayers to do their part, and you relied on the Saren Defenders to do their part. And since you guys had fought the cultists already, you kind of already knew how they fought. And so you guys really didn't have much of a hard time clearing out the Plateau of Sorrow.
Yeah.
You guys seemed to kind of knife your way through that one actually pretty quick. I guess at that point you were familiar with with how they fought and what their abilities were and what they could do.
And we had a lot of support too. We had one extra powerful NPC. By the time we got to, where was it?
Yeah, the hardest time we had with that day was the stream.
Yeah, right. I want to say by the time we were up to the Fall Festival, everybody knew their characters, but they knew most of what other characters would do and how to support. And so after that, the fights, I'm not going to say the fights were easier, but there wasn't as much confusion as far as how to help each other.
I think out of all the parties, this group gelled the fastest as far as the number of, every other group seemed to have a certain point to where all of a sudden they just it's like, boom, everything just went into sync. Right. And for some of the other groups, it was much farther. Now, you guys didn't play as long as any of them either. But I think, what Fall Festival was only, what episode was that for you guys? That was
10-ish, I think.
10?
Yeah.
10. It was like,
10.
About episode 10. This group gelled. This group was almost running like clockwork at that point in time. So. Yeah, your tactics were kind of down, and then so when it came to the aspect, the way y'all had like animal armies set up too.
Yeah, we had prepped pretty well. Well, as we went through and we said, okay, everyone, look, what have you got, and what can you do? Please don't leave anything back at the hotel.
Yeah.
Don't forget you have something that will help. And,
yes, like Wand of Secrets.
Yeah, that what was that? That was an episode.
That was the
Enter the Dragon. Yeah. Fire! How many more traps are down here? Oh, I got this thing that detects traps.
I remember reminding someone, don't you have gloves with missile snaring? Oh yeah, I do.
I think my favorite line out of that whole one is, "You're not allowed to have any magic items anymore." As Bevier shouts that to Durnavir, who's like, "Hey, after the party's been hit in 2 corridors with traps." And they get to this 3rd long corridor, and they're just looking at it. They're like, "This thing's got to be trapped. Don't we have any way to take the traps?" And Durnavir pulls out the wand. "I got this wand of secrets." Bevir's like, "You're not allowed to have any magic items anymore," because that could have been useful 2 hallways ago.
Yeah, say we're all here in tatters and soot covered, and come on, work with me here.
Rough.
Oh yeah.
Crowd.
But the one thing that we didn't do, and this isn't just us, I think this is groups in general, is either wanting to take rests or delaying to look at stuff. And that got off our timeline.
Yeah, that hurt us here, and without really thinking about it, because it had been our habit. We're like, okay, we'll stop for 20 minutes here in this room.
Right. So this group had a wizard who had ritual spells of detect magic and identify. So to their benefit, many times they were able to, detect a magic item and then identify it, just taking only like 20 minutes, and then they could move on with the advantage of the magic item behind them. But when it came to this final plateau of sorrow and time was of the essence, they stuck to their guns. And, after like 8 or 9 of these, well, they ended up 90 minutes behind the clock. So
yeah,
it kind of was beneficial. Lots of other times it's a good thing to do because it doesn't waste slots. It doesn't waste, too much time. But here, this one, didn't let you get the Hallow spell off.
Yeah, we were on too tight a time frame, and I don't think any of us really were cognizant of that.
Yeah, and then, but you did manage to grapple the aspect of Tiamat with the apparatus of Qualesh.
Apparatus comes in handy again.
Yeah, it did. We got a little sloppy there at the end. There was, as far as the tactics go, we kind of blocked each other and kind of stumbled, and there were some times in there I was holding my breath like crap. I don't know if this is going to work.
Well, you did have 2 bags of tricks fully unloaded.
And they actually even did a little something that time.
And if they did anything, they absorbed attacks. I mean, because they're going after a chaotic creature who's not really focusing attacks; they're really attacking at random. And anyway, make a long story short, aspect of Tiamat died due to the Fellhammer Five finally getting the killing blow, and then severing the altar, which was trying to rebuild the aspect of Tiamat. Which is
want to do that
costly. That was costly, but I think it had to be done.
It did.
You made a noble sacrifice.
You had 2 weapons. You had 2 items in the party that could have done it, or 3 technically. I guess the apparatus could have done it too. But it's all the groups basically faced some kind of a sacrifice. The Dragon Slayers faced one. The Sarah Defenders had to do 2, so they had to sacrifice 2. But they also had 1 more legendary item than most groups did too, so that kind of balanced out because they had the 4 elemental weapons. And this group only had to make the 1 sacrifice, which they did, and that was it. That was the campaign. So I guess in a nutshell, what did you guys think of first stage?
Oh, it was awesome. It was a. The plot, I mean, you did have to take notes because the plot was pretty involved.
Yeah.
But something maybe you can't appreciate on the stream, I'm not sure if you appreciate how good the terrain, the setups are. It's pretty cool. It's a lot of fun.
Yes. So Jim is my partner in crime when it came to Dwarven Forge investment. Jim and I have invested so much in Dwarven Forge terrain, and I really enjoyed it. It's hard for me to play online just because the terrain does look so cool when you can really set it up and get it out there and stuff.
And I agree. Back when I played a little, I had a buddy who got me into it. I played a little bit in high school, and this was in the late 80s, early 90s, and we always used to talk about how cool would it be if players could swap messages and nobody knew, or all these different things that we wish we could do in a campaign that you can do now with D&D Beyond and Skype and all the other things. That takes a lot of the overhead out of the campaign. And since this is really only my 2nd campaign and it's been fairly recent, this was all a bit of a learning curve, but it was also great because you didn't have to spend forever looking up a rule. Boom, you click on it, it's right there.
Yeah.
And as much as all those digital tools are great, I still love the tabletop terrain. I like to be able to touch it. I like to be able to look at it. It keeps some of the imagination going. You got it there, but there's an imagination flow to it, and that was a lot of fun. And the setup in the game room was premium. It was great.
Yeah, and Bill, that you definitely helped. Bill's a kind of a 3D printer. Bevier's a 3D printer extraordinaire, helping with a lot of the little tokens and things like that we use for 3D printing.
Second age. Oh, sorry.
I will point that out. now is this is the only drawback to the game is we can't take our characters all the way. We're not going.
I agree.
We're not going to 20 to godhood, that sort of thing. We're kind of giving them up halfway, and there's a
bittersweet,
little sadness associated with that.
So
I want to see, and I gave.
So you touch on that, and that's a good point. That's a good point. It feels like it's like, oh, I still wanted to play this character, and I'm glad you think that too, because that kind of tells me that everything was kind of going good. You really want to play it. So the first stage, my intent of the first stage was to establish the world, and because the world is new, and it's meant to be new to adventuring, it worked out that it's homebrew, and you guys were new to the world too. So you didn't really have any out-of-character info that you could leverage, because as players, you're learning the world right along with your characters that are learning the world. And, at that point, it's like I wanted to advance the world a bit, but at the same time, it's like I didn't want to take it to the maximum, because I want to build it. I want to get you guys familiar with it. And then with your second characters, those second characters have now lived through the first stage, even though they may not have been a part of the storylines. As a player, you now kind of know, your character knows some history. As a player, you also know the history too. So it makes it a little more real for you, I guess, as a player through your new character. Because now you kind of understand a couple of things. You understand, how I'm DMing, what I'm DMing, what I'm like. And I understand, kind of you as a player. You understand the world dynamics now as a player. And so that your next character is now going to be able to more incorporate and embrace some of the nuances of some of the rules and mechanics, like, item crafting or herbology, or renown gaining, or building construction. So now you as a player are a little more familiar with it. So your second age character kind of has some of that knowledge built in now. Because I'm anticipating the second age to go farther than the first age. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, and as a newer player, in this one, in the first stage, I wanted my character, I wanted him to be a little bit of a one-off. I didn't want a stereotypical fighter.
Right.
And that ended up being a liability in the actual fighting sense, the way he was set up. But I also, being newish, I didn't role play him in some ways as well as I could, in the way of setting up the ideals and flaws and so forth. So
right.
I feel better about doing that in the second age.
Yeah. And I knew that was going to be a learning curve too. So things like, you touched right on it. Ideals, flaws, bonds, traits, how those work. And, things like, what was the other one I was going to mention? Oh, dang it. It flew right out of my head. Those plus, renown manipulation, how to gain renown. And, oh, darn it. Forgot what the last thing was. But you were touching right on it. And as a new player and learning some of the new rules, then, especially for you for being, new to 5e, and several other players were actually, a lot of the Dragon Slayers were all new to 5e. So this was really their first kind of adventure through 5e. But how do you set up, classes, multi-classing? What can the classes really do? How do they really work? So with your second character, you're going to be a lot more, advanced as far as how to do that makeup.
And I'm looking forward to the world being more advanced.
Yes.
And there were a lot of I don't want to mention any of them, but there were a lot of rumors that we came across that we don't know what the resolutions are going to be. We never got to explore.
Yep.
The Eye of Sorrow.
Yep.
There were a ton of different things, Fey enclaves and so forth that flesh out the world. And there were whole areas of the map our party never went to.
Yep.
In fact, once we left Fellhammer, the farthest north we ever went again was Emdale of the Fall Festival. The rest of our time was spent in the south and the south and the east.
Yeah.
We never went up north again. So there's a lot that just we haven't done.
It was kind of funny because like one of the other groups, they never went south. They stayed in the north. It was kind of so the crosses were all kind of happening there in the central area, in the central east and west. So, but anyway, that was it. This kind of wraps up the campaign. Any last comments, thoughts, things you're looking forward to, or?
No, this was great. This was fun. I look forward to every session, and
Awesome.
I don't want 6 months to go by before we get to play again.
We'll see what I can do. It's
know,
like I've had a couple of thoughts of maybe some prequels or something, but we'll see.
There you go.
I noticed that because we were doing a lot of, as you mentioned, the RP offline, I'm sorry, not offline, not the game, but online.
Yeah, online.
We were set. So by the time we got to the game, we were basically ready to go. We were in a fight.
Yeah.
And sometimes I miss the face-to-face RP.
I think you'll see a little more of that in the second age, because in the second age, I'm able to keep track of your times a lot easier because both groups are going to be playing on the same timeline. In the first age, when I had one group that played weekly, it really made me kind of do that in order to keep things in sync. I think another advantage of the second age is all of you are starting at the exact same time at the exact same level, right? So bragging rights goes to those who earn it. There's not a group that's a senior group and a lesser group, and because you guys were the junior group out of the three because you started the latest, right?
But the best quality, just
you darn near caught. Actually, I think some of you are equal level to some of the Saren defenders. You kind of caught up to them.
I think so.
Some of I think one level behind most of them, and equal to a couple of them.
In the second age, our characters will be the legends.
The
That's
legends. Right. Game on. The gauntlet has been thrown. So
cool.
Thank you guys, Xanthos, Bevier, for joining this. This has been an awesome trip for me down memory lane. It's like even some things you guys brought up, it's like I had forgotten. There's a lot to keep track of as a DM. It really is. And
you put a lot of work into the.
I try.
Very much enjoyed it.
It was really a lot in there. A lot. You could write a book.
I could write it. Speaking of a book, no.
I gave you a little
segue. Check out the book.
Saren Valley short stories.
I know, right? Short stories of Saren Valley. Giving Tella Trimblewin some ideas. He's watching. But thank you guys. Thank everybody for watching. Thanks for joining us. Click follow if you haven't. It helps us out. Check out the merch store. This is a Fellhammer 5. This was our recap. And we will see everybody again in the second age. You guys have a good one and take care.